What are the reasons behind Turkey's decision to block NATO membership for Sweden and Finland?
As far as Turkey is concerned, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, Russia's active war against Ukraine, to be more correct, is something that Turkey has taken a very clear position on in terms of declaring it as an active war, in terms of its support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, its sovereignty. This is actually something that Turkey has been doing since there has been an encroachment on Ukraine's territorial integrity by Russia since 2014. Turkey has never recognized the annexation by Russia of Crimea, and it has been making these points. So it's a fairly consistent attitude on the part of Turkey in terms of supporting Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. That said, Turkey also has obviously important relations with Russia. This is a relationship that, despite being a NATO member, Turkey has been cultivating in the past few years, at sometimes to the resentment of its allies. And that has developed in many different spheres, but it's a very complicated relationship that Turkey has had with Russia, because as on the one side, there is a seeming progress in terms of bilateral relations and cooperation, including Turkey's acquisition of the S-400 missile defense system from Russia. On the other hand, in many different theaters, such as Syria, the South Caucasus, and Libya, Turkey and Russia are actually at the opposite ends of the equation. So they find themselves in a serious disagreement. But what they've been able to do throughout the years is to manage these disagreements successfully. So something similar is happening in the context of the war between Ukraine and Russia, in the sense that Turkey is standing up for Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. It is opposing this war on the part of Russia. It is supporting Ukraine, including by the sale of the Turkish drones that have been influential in terms of the impact they have had. But at the same time, Turkey is not burning its bridges with Russia. It has not joined the sanctions that have been imposed by the United States and other Western allies. And it is at the same time trying to leverage its good standing, both in Kiev and in Moscow, to see if it might be able to facilitate solutions to some problems, including to the war. It held 2 rounds of talks in Turkey between Russia and Ukraine that were unsuccessful, unfortunately. And right now, you will be aware that Turkey is trying to see if it might help facilitate the transport of grain from Ukrainian ports to the international market. So Turkey is positioning itself in a manner where it is firm in its stance for Ukraine, but at the same time, it is trying to provide solutions to these problems. Now, at the same time, as you mentioned, Turkey has come out and expressed its concerns as far as Sweden and Finland's bid to join NATO. This actually is not in line with Turkey's traditional policy of supporting NATO's open door policy. And Turkey has made the point that it continues to support NATO's open door policy, but that it has certain concerns with Sweden and Finland in relation to basically 2 main things: the permissive environment that Turkey believes Sweden particularly, but also Finland, is providing to actors that Turkey believe are affiliated with terrorist organizations that target Turkey, and also to the fact, because of the fact that both these countries have imposed arms embargoes on Turkey since 2019, when Turkey had conducted a military operation in North Syria. Both Sweden and Finland, in reaction to that, had imposed arms embargoes on Turkey. And Turkey's basic argument on both cases is, if you want to join an alliance where Turkey is a member, you have to be firm in your stance against terrorist organizations that are targeting Turkey. And second, the premise of imposing embargoes on a country with whom you want to be an ally does not make sense. So you need to walk back this decision. So that's the premise of Turkey's stance.
How is the Turkish domestic political context like at the present, and is it related in any degree to Turkey's position regarding Sweden and Finland's NATO membership?
Well, I think we would be naive if we didn't think that political leaders looked at the domestic scene and built linkages between what they are doing on the international scene and the implications it may have domestically. This is not necessarily unique to Turkey, but I think in Turkey's case, it's something that is factored in maybe more than in some other countries. There's no doubt about that. Also, particularly because of the fact that Turkey is slowly approaching an election period. Next year, Turkey is slated to have parliamentary and presidential elections. Next year also marks the centennial of the founding of the Turkish Republic. So there is a great deal of symbolism in that as well. And this all comes at a point in time where the ruling government, the AKP, under President Erdogan, that has been in power since for almost 20 years now, more than 20 years now, is facing the biggest challenge in the polls that it has seen since it has been in power. This is a party that has enjoyed support from the Turkish public that had gone up to almost the 50% numbers, whereas now it is dwindling down, according to many polls, around 20 to 25, maximum 30%. And the opposition, it seems, is on the rise. So it comes in a difficult domestic political context that is a challenge for the government. Therefore, there's no doubt that the implications of its position on the international scene, on the domestic equation, is something that is being factored in. But I think, Turkey's point of departure on this matter, I doubt was necessarily the domestic scene, and that it was not driven by that, though I'm sure it was a calculation. This is more about a visceral sensation in Turkey that some of its allies in the West, and in this case, some of its prospective allies, Sweden and Finland, are not taking Turkey's security concerns seriously. They're not taking them to heart. And, Turkey is drawing upon previous examples that it has seen. For example, Greece was very successful in imposing its demands and expectations on what was then known as the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, to the extent that the country had to change its constitution and even change its name. And this is actually something that Turkish officials are referring to in the context of Sweden and Finland, saying that we're not the first ones doing this. It is legitimate, and it is about our concerns about terrorism. We expect them to be taken seriously. And that, in that small context, makes sense, particularly in the Turkish eye, and I think can be understood. But the problem, of course, is the geopolitical context in which Turkey has made this case. The war in Ukraine has created such a circumstance in geopolitics that, of course, NATO has become more important. We can see from the historic change in Finland and Sweden's approach that becoming a member of the alliance has become more important. And there is unanimous support, except for Turkey, for Sweden and Finland's bid to join NATO. And Turkey's obstruction, of course, is seen to be at the expense of the interests of the Western alliance. So that geopolitical context, I think, is muddling Turkey's concerns and their legitimacy. And the second, I think, mistake I would say that Turkey has made is the manner in which it has presented its case. According to the Finn and Swedish officials, they were not forewarned in the context of their NATO bid about this problem. Turkey had been making the case, particularly to Sweden, about its concerns in terms of Sweden's engagement with these actors that Turkey finds to be affiliated with terrorist organizations. There had been démarches going on, but it seems Turkey did not necessarily link that with Sweden's bid to join NATO, which is why both Finland and Sweden argue that they were caught off guard by the way in which Turkey made this case. So the manner in which it was done, the fact that it was done publicly, I think has all taken away from the power of the legitimacy of Turkey's concerns.
What is the PKK? What is its relevance in Turkish security and political context? And how could this move impact regional security?
When you look at Turkey's threat perceptions and it's the security paradigm that Turkey finds itself within, obviously the war between Russia and Ukraine and all of the geopolitical developments around Turkey are important. But the primary concern that is directly affecting Turkey and that is actually claiming Turkish lives, is the threat of terrorism. And while Turkey is dealing with a number of terrorist organizations, both in and around Turkey, including ISIS, obviously, the leading one that has been targeting Turkey now for almost over 40 years has been the PKK. This is a Marxist-Leninist terrorist organization that has an ethnic separatist agenda in Turkey. And it is an organization that has been recognized not only by Turkey, but also by the United States and by the European Union as a terrorist organization. It has been designated as such. And this is an organization that has, throughout the years, been able to establish not only its presence outside of Turkey, particularly in Iraq and Syria, where they have bases, but also it's been able to build a network throughout Europe where there is a good number of Kurdish diaspora on which this organization preys. under the pretense that it is standing up for Kurdish rights, but the tool that it is employing for whatever bizarre objectives it may have that are not necessarily Kurdish rights, because it is also targeting Kurdish civilians and schools that Turkey's Kurdish population go to in the southeast of Turkey. It is employing terrorism. So that is obviously not acceptable. And this is a serious concern for Turkey, and it is an ongoing fight. Currently, throughout the past couple of years, Turkey has been able to clamp down on the activities of this organization within Turkey. Thankfully, there are almost no attacks inside of Turkey that are being perpetrated by the PKK, but its presence across Turkey's borders, particularly in Iraq and in Syria, is a serious concern. And in the case of Syria, they have established some offshoots presences, which is known as the PYD, and that is the political front of them, and the YPG, which is their military front, directly linked and working under the same hierarchical structure as the PKK. And that is one of Turkey's problems, because some of Turkey's Western allies, led by the United States, have tapped into this organization and its presence in Syria as a means of using them as a proxy in the fight against ISIS. And that's where the challenge is, because in Turkey's eyes, its Western allies, the United States included, are using a terrorist organization to fight another terrorist organization, which obviously is unacceptable according to Turkey. And there has been a shift in the recent years on the US position on this, because whereas they were more close to referring to the PYD and the YPG as terrorist organizations, or they were confessing their affiliation to the PKK, once the United States decided to use them in this effort against ISIS, they changed their rhetoric. They are now referring to them as the Syrian Democratic Forces. In fact, you can find on Google some American officials almost jokingly saying that that was a very smart change of name to sort of cloak the reality of the PYD YPG. And in Sweden's case, they have also been engaging with these actors, which has caused great resentment in Turkey. So it is this mixture of Turkey's perceived challenge from the PKK and its offshoots, in this case, the PYD YPG, and the fact that some of Turkey's allies and partners are working with these organizations to fight ISIS or for other reasons, that is creating this sense of resentment in Turkey. Now, by making the point through Sweden and Finland that this is not acceptable and that these types of engagements need to be ended as soon as possible and that they are unacceptable in the fight against terrorism, Turkey obviously is talking to a bigger crowd. It is also sending the message to its allies and to countries like the United States that this is simply not a sustainable policy. Now, will that yield results? Will Turkey's position vis-a-vis Sweden and Finland have implications on US policy? We do not see signs of that at all on the side of the United States, but I'm sure that this is a consideration. And frankly speaking, I do not think that when an ally such as Turkey, that has suffered so much from terrorism and that is focused on a threat right across its border in Syria, in Iraq, that is linked to the PKK, that it is sustainable for its allies to maintain an engagement with this organization. So at one point or another, there will have to be a change. Turkey will also have to find a way to ensure that its allies are comfortable that the fight against ISIS will be able to continue without using the PYD and the YPG in Syria.
Is the intention then to produce not only a change of attitude from Sweden and Finland regarding the PKK, but a significant shift in the dynamics of the conflict in Syria as related to the security concerns you mentioned?
One of the considerations, or one of the challenges that Turkey feels upon itself is that the support that is being accorded to the PYD YPG under the pretext of them being called the Syrian Democratic Forces, is providing an opportunity for this element to build a physical presence and control on Syrian territory that Turkey has concerns about, particularly given the fact that they are directly under the supervision of an organization, the PKK, that has a separatist agenda vis-a-vis Turkey. So there are a lot of elements that are concerning Turkey. The demographic changes that are being imposed within Syria are also an element. And Turkey has interests in that regard as well. That is why when you see Turkey coming together with Iran and Russia under what is called the Astana format, that basically focuses on the crisis and the situation in Syria, all three countries are making the point that they support the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Syria. That is code for Turkey's concern in the sense that it does not want Syria to be broken up. It does not want an independent Kurdish entity under the YPG that targets Turkey to be established there. And it is worried that what its allies are doing are supporting this process, actually. So it is that dynamic that Turkey is trying to break.
In this context, what are Turkish positions and expectations related to the situation in Syria, especially in relation to the Syrian regime?
I think it's fairly clear in Turkey's case, and I can understand how it's difficult to see it that way because of the complexities. First of all, let's clarify one point. It's not only Turkey that is standing firmly for the territorial integrity of Syria. It is written in the United Nations Security Council that has been adopted vis-a-vis Syria as one of the main principles. And obviously, no country wants arbitrary changes in the borders around itself that can lead to all sorts of domino effects. So clearly, it's in Turkey's interests that the territorial integrity not only of Syria, but of Turkey and all the countries in the region, including Ukraine, for example, are respected by all. So that's an important point to make. The second point is, as far as Turkey's policy vis-a-vis Syria is concerned, it is premised on what I just mentioned, the fact that Syria's territorial integrity should be preserved. And I think the second leading element as far as Turkey is concerned is that it is the Syrian people that need to decide on the future of their country. Now, the challenge there is that a significant portion of the Syrian population has been displaced. Significant number of them are living in Turkey, which is why the political process that had been continuing in Geneva for some time now is critically important. But unfortunately, there has not been progress there. So Turkey's aspiration here, and I agree with you, the international focus has unfortunately shifted away from Syria. And in fact, it has even shifted away from the humanitarian challenge and dramatic circumstances under which the displaced Syrian people live, not only the ones within Turkey, but also the ones that are living outside of the areas that are controlled by Bashar al-Assad, who has used every method possible, including chemical weapons, against his own people. So it's a very dramatic circumstance that the Syrian people find themselves in. And it's an increasing challenge for countries like Turkey that are hosting such a significant number of Syrians in their countries. And you will remember the way in which many of Turkey's European allies reacted and continue to react. For example, we see pushbacks in the Aegean by the Greek naval forces when they see boats carrying Syrian refugees. Many of them get killed there, unfortunately. That is in stark contrast to what has been done rightfully in terms of embracing the Ukrainians. So there is definitely a different approach that when you make a comparison in that sense. And I think it's good that you're highlighting the continuing relevance of this problem and the importance of it. But as far as Turkey is concerned, Bashar al-Assad obviously is a tainted leader. He has done the most egregious violations of human rights against his own people. The future of the country, however, will be decided by the Syrians. That is the official narrative that Turkey employs. And if the political process avails itself and the Syrian people are able to vote in what is accepted by the international community as a legitimate election, then the future that they decide in that context will be acceptable to Turkey. And Turkey's insistence, obviously, will be particularly on preserving the territorial integrity of Syria. What type of solutions they find internally in terms of local rule and so on, obviously will be up to the Syrian people themselves. And that is the narrative that Turkey is advocating right now.
You mentioned the differences on how Ukrainian refugees have been welcomed in Europe vis-a-vis Syrian refugees, and the same could be said at different times about Iraqi and Libyan refugees. Does religious identity factor into these issues and in perceptions of differences between Turkey and other NATO allies and European countries?
is difficult and controversial to talk about. It's not something new either. There's a lot of, when you look into history, I'm talking hundreds of years of history in Europe and the Turkish experience in that regard. The banner of religion or identity have been there and have been misused by great powers throughout history. And I don't think it is a mainstream issue or a mainstream determining element in the way in which politics play out in the world still. But I think there's an undercurrent in every country that has a certain degree of impact. And we see occasional bursts of this sensation coming to the fore. We saw it in the context of Ukraine, where I won't name individuals, but politicians from different countries in Europe who had assumed the highest levels of responsibility in their own countries or within the European Union referred to the Ukrainians as they are one of us. They have blonde hair and blue eyes just like us. They are fellow Christians. Now, if that is the point of departure when we are going to look at a problem or a challenge, then the world is in for trouble, and Samuel Huntington will be proven right beyond his imagination. I don't think, obviously, that this is the right prism through which we need to look at the world. And the fact of the matter is, while circumstances and the experiences on, you refer to the war on terror, yes, the impact that ISIS has had on the perception of Islam, which is such a shame for people who come from that religion, such as myself, because it represents such a marginal and, incomprehensible position that has nothing to do with the religion itself. And if that perception is defining the approach to a religion or an identity, then it's a problem for the world. But I think it is an important question and one worth thinking about, because as I mentioned, whereas it is not, in my opinion, thankfully, the mainstream element that is determining politics, we see undercurrents of this throughout the world. And obviously, it is not just one country, one religion, or a certain identity that needs to think about this. It is the world as a whole. It is also countries like Turkey that bear important responsibility in continuing to reflect the reality that, their identity, their beliefs, obviously, are consistent with the humanitarian aspirations of each and every individual on the world. So this is a very challenging topic. This is probably one of the most difficult questions you could have imagined for me. I'm not sure I was able to give a very satisfactory answer, but as I mentioned, I think the summary answer to your question is there is an undercurrent always at play in this regard. It is not mainstream, and it should never be allowed to go mainstream.
How are continuity and change in Turkish politics and foreign policy impacting its role in NATO and aspirations towards EU membership?
Turkey's accession process to the European Union. This has been a very long story for Turkey and for the European Union, and frankly, it's not going anywhere. Nevertheless, Turkey continues to be a candidate country, and the official rhetoric in Turkey is that it continues to pursue this goal. And when you look at the population, there is continuing support for Turkey's prospective membership in the European Union. And there are many, including myself, who believe that this is an important goal for Turkey and something that Turkey should continue to aspire for. And that's something, it is something that will also strengthen the European Union itself. Nevertheless, political realities are where they are, and this process is really not going anywhere. It's in a significant stalemate, to the extent that when you look at the narrative within the European Union, when they are talking about prospective potential members, they are focused on the Western Balkans, as they call it, leaving Turkey aside, and now increasingly on Ukraine, for example. Again, no mention of Turkey. So it's clear that Turkey has been mentally, on the part of the European Union, put in a different basket on its own, despite the fact that it is the longest candidate member for EU membership. So that's where that continues to stand. As far as NATO is concerned, Turkey is one of the older members of the alliance. It commemorated 70 years of joining NATO this year. It's made significant contributions to NATO during the Cold War and after, because let's think a little bit, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, whereas many of Turkey's allies were able to benefit from what we refer to as a peace dividend, downsizing their armies, believing that peace had come. It was the end of history, let's not forget. But for Turkey, it never was. Conflict never ended because conflicts erupted in the Southern Caucasus, Azerbaijan and Armenia. Conflicts erupted in the Balkans. Now we are to the west of Turkey with implications for Turkey. And then we had the war in Iraq, Iran, Iraq, and then currently we have Syria. And we're not even talking about the challenges in the Middle East or the continuing problem of the Cyprus dispute. So from Turkey's perspective, there has never been peace and tranquility in its neighborhood, which has been a challenge, which is why NATO membership has always been important for Turkey, and which is why Turkey has been continuing its contributions to NATO, despite the fact that there has been an increasing number of problems between Turkey and its allies that have also trickled down into the alliance, as we see, for example, in the case of Sweden and Finland trying to join NATO, and as we've been seeing for a while in terms of the implications of problems Turkey has with the United States and some of its allies, and how it's implicating work that is being done in NATO. You might remember in 2019, there was another NATO meeting called the NATO Leaders Meeting that was going to take place in London. And Turkey made the headlines then as well, because it was obstructing defense plans that were designed for Poland and the Baltics. And the issue was the same. Turkey was asking its allies to support it in its fight against the PKK and its offshoots, the PYD, YPG. And it was blocking these plans because Turkey's own plans had been blocked by the United States and other allies. So this is just an example of how some bilateral issues that Turkey is having with its allies have started to trickle down into the alliance and are therefore obviously tainting the perception of Turkey as a reliable ally. And this has been significantly aggravated by wrong decisions that Turkey has made, most notably in the case of the acquisition of the S-400 from the Russian Federation. That, I think, was a big strategic mistake on the part of Turkey. That has led to sanctions from the United States. That has led to Turkey being pushed out of the F-35 program, where Turkey was not just to buy the aircraft, but it was one of the partners of the program that had invested in the program, and that was also slated to become the center for rehabilitating the engines in Turkey. So there were a lot of elements that Turkey was going to benefit from. But that decision to buy the S-400 obviously also increased worries about Turkey's orientation and its commitment to its responsibilities as a NATO ally. I think one of the reasons why you see this sort of sense of estrangement that is taking place between Turkey and its allies is a result of the fact that in the post-Cold War era, obviously, we're moving more towards a multipolar world. Turkey sees different challenges compared to its allies. We're in an era where, prior to the war in Ukraine, we were always talking about the shift of the United States to Asia. It's focused on a rising China. And even in the aftermath of the war on Ukraine, the United States has continued to make this point. So obviously, countries, regional actors like Turkey, are looking to further their own interests with their own capabilities, and which is why you see, for example, Turkey cooperating with Syria and Russia, with Iran and Russia, despite all its challenges in theaters like Syria. So it is a more complex geopolitical environment in which Turkey is trying to further its interests, not only by seeing the world through the prism of NATO, but from a wider angle. And there you have an increasing number of disagreements between Turkey and its allies. So that, I think, is the context in which we see all of these things evolving, and its decision to stand against Finland and Sweden's idea to join NATO is being perceived, I believe, in the same context. The fact that NATO membership continues to be central to Turkey's security and its defense policies. There's a significant degree of sincere anger in Turkey towards its allies because of their policies, and that is having a fallout effect on the level of trust or the perception that the Turkish society has as far as the NATO alliance is concerned. And that is making the debate around NATO very heated in Turkey. Right now, when you look at the public polls, there is overwhelming support for Turkey's demands from Sweden and Finland, simply because of the fact that everyone in Turkey feels directly affected by the threat of terrorism. So when Turkey is making that type of a demand, that is considered to be legitimate. I think the important thing here is that the security perceptions that Turkey and its society feels are not being understood to the extent that they need to by its allies. At the same time, those security perceptions that Turkey has and feels are translating into policies that are viewed by Turkey's allies as being obstructionist. And I think it is that vacuum that is creating a challenge, where I think there is more room for better public messaging on the part of Turkey, for using the right rhetoric, and also for better diplomacy. In the case of Sweden and Finland, for example, presenting this case in a different manner, in a timely fashion, trying to see if there might have been a way to solve this behind closed doors before elevating it to this extent, may have been better options for Turkey.